Hi y'all, welcome back. I'm Barbie Jean. Today I will be reading an intimate writing of mine, and then we're going to talk about redefining virginity. I'm excited. Let's get into it. So for those of you that don't know, I wrote a book. It's a memoir about my life in journal format, chronicling my life and sex and just finding my identity and exploring and lots of fun themes. But the story I'm going to read today was the first time I had sex or was intimate with someone. So I was 15 years old, and we're going to be back in that 15-year-old mind of Barbie Jean. So November 1st, 2007. Well, apparently I lost my virginity last night. I don't even know what to think. And now I'm grounded for 3 months. Fuck my life. One silver lining to all of this is that he was hot. He's a football stud with short brown hair. I don't even remember how we started talking, but I know I looked sexy in my cowboy hat and short skirt, so I guess I get it. Last night, my cheerleading friend had her annual Halloween party. Mom and Dad let me go, but I didn't tell them that some of the football guys were sleeping over. They probably wouldn't have approved. And even though I didn't enjoy lying to them, I couldn't not go to this junior party. A bunch of upperclassmen were attending, and I was one of the few sophomores invited. Once I made the varsity team last year as a freshman, I felt like my social status went up immensely. In middle school, I was shy with glasses and braces, played in band, and was a gymnast through the Lombard Park district. I was friends with some of the popular kids, but I hung out mostly with an athletic mix of girls. When I started high school with contact eye lenses and a beautifully corrected smile, I immediately started getting noticed by boys when before I never was. It felt good to be desired for a change, and I fully embraced it. It was a cherry on top that my 8 years of gymnastics put me on the varsity cheerleading squad and boosted my confidence even more. I immediately became quite close with the sophomores, now junior girls on the cheerleading team, specifically the Halloween party host, who is such a fun, bubbly person to be around with bright blonde hair that always looks perfect. She's inspired me to take more time on my hair and makeup, and I've realized how much I enjoy spicing up my look for school every day with different hairdos. I never used to care. Being surrounded by confident and attractive women has its perks, and I've turned into one of them. Last night wasn't the first time I've been drunk at an upperclassman party. My cheer friend's mom lets us party at her house pretty often. Last month, she had a party after homecoming, and I got fingered on top of the stairs for the first time. It wasn't even my date that fingered me. I kind of ditched him, oops. I remember the one that fingered me whispering in my ear saying, "You are so soft." His compliment made me giggle, but I also smiled, appreciating his honest remark. Thank goodness to my friends for experiencing boys before I did. I couldn't believe I had no idea women shaved their bodies. I yelled at Mom for not telling me, and she blamed it on a generational gap. I've often found myself feeling stupid in many instances as I've grown up because I feel like Mom and Dad never sat us down to tell us, okay, this is how it is. Instead, they let us figure it out. When Sis and I were 8 years old, we came inside for dinner after playing kickball in the yard with the neighbor kids. Mom asked us how the game was, and I exclaimed, "I got hit in the balls." I remember both Mom and Dad were struggling not to laugh, and then Sis chimed in, "Yeah, she did." I felt proud and excited to share my new word. Dad said, "What do you think balls are, girls?" I looked at Sissy and then back at Mom and Dad and replied, "My booty buns." They corrected me and filled us in on the actual definition of the word balls and had to tell us that we didn't even have balls. I thought back to the neighbor boy that said the word initially. I felt embarrassed that I didn't already know what it meant. It's quite often that I felt dumb and naive. Anyways, back to last night. Apparently drunk me is very horny. I still can't believe I allegedly had sex last night. I woke up this morning on the basement floor and felt miserable. I immediately went to the bathroom to puke. We drank UV blue vodka all night, so it literally was a blue explosion in the toilet. Gross, I know. After I splashed some water on my face and pulled myself together, I went upstairs and pretty much everyone was awake and hanging out in the living room. I went to the kitchen to get some water and my cheer friends bombarded me with questions about what I remembered from the night. The proof was not just his word, but the fact that he popped my cherry on the sheets in the basement. I went straight to the bathroom after that conversation with them and did some investigating. I didn't feel any different or sore. Maybe he has a small penis? To be honest, I couldn't believe I agreed to him putting his dick inside me. But also, maybe I did. I remembered meeting Dylan, the wide receiver stud, early on in the night. I knew of him, but we never spoke until last night. As the night went on, his conversation with me got more and more flirty. I remember us going into the spare bedroom in the basement and making out a lot. But again, the night was blurry. I always imagined my first time would be special and intimate. But maybe that's just because everyone says it should be. I do feel slightly robbed of that experience, though. After probing my vagina in the bathroom looking for clues, I rejoined my friends on the couch. Everyone was talking about it, growing more silent and weird when I sat down. It felt like Dylan was avoiding making eye contact with me. I decided I had to confront him. "Dylan, is it true?" I questioned, and all the eyes in the room turned to his red face. He said he asked me at the time if it was what I wanted, the sex, and I said yes. He said he didn't know I was so drunk. I've never blacked out like that before. There were hours and hours of time that I couldn't recall. How terrifying. Some of the girls started defending me, saying that Dylan could be lying. I felt super uncomfortable because I couldn't remember any of it. It's like my mind completely blocked out that part of the evening. Pretty scary to have no recollection, but some of the girls said they blacked out a bit too, so that was reassuring. My hangover this morning was the worst one yet. I distracted myself the rest of my time there, distancing myself from him. I felt weird. I felt like I didn't even know him, or perhaps I just didn't remember the conversation we had. I could tell he felt uncomfortable about the entire situation too. I just wanted to forget it ever happened, to be honest, and I couldn't even get a good read on what he wanted with me after this. It was all around just a bizarre morning on so many levels. After I attempted eating breakfast, I got a ride home, went upstairs to my bedroom, and logged into instant messaging right away. This is where my day goes from terrible to even worse. I began messaging my church bestie, asking her advice on what to do. She immediately said I should take the day after pill, and she brought up the whole condom thing, which I didn't even think of. I felt like such an idiot. Why didn't I think to ask Dylan if he wore a condom? I guess I was still in shock and trying to forget it. I would hope he would have been responsible enough. He is a year older than me. Mid-conversation, facing my window, typing away on my computer, Dad came tearing up the stairs, yelling my name. "Barbara Jean, you get your butt off that computer right this minute." I hate when Dad yells my entire name, or just yells in general. He is so terrifying. I spun around in my chair as he grabbed my phone off my bed and put it in his pocket. He walked over to me and turned off my computer. He shouted, "You're too young to have sex, and I can't believe you're 15. I started crying and shouting back, "What the heck, Dad? You invaded my privacy." It was obvious that he somehow hacked into my conversation with his computer tech mind. We yelled back and forth at each other, and it ended with him saying that I was grounded for 3 months. When Mom came in shortly after, she said she was putting me on birth control. I felt violated by the parental control, and their disappointment in me felt even worse. Mom also went to the store and bought me the day after pill and made me take it right away. I've been peeing out my butt all day because of it. Speaking of popping cherries, what a cherry on top. I had diarrhea for the day, as if my day couldn't get any worse. I basically cried for what felt like hours and lay on my bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to remember the sex. Sis came into my room and cheered me up a bit, which was nice. She made me laugh about something I don't even remember now. At least now we know not to talk about anything rated R on AIM anymore. She seems to think I won't be grounded for the entire 3 months. I sure hope she's right. I'm pissed at Dad. I can't believe he did that. He read a completely private conversation where I was confiding in my friend. It's ridiculous. Gosh, I'm so angry. How would he feel if I invaded his privacy and went through his computer to read all of his conversations? I said that to Mom earlier and she laughed in my face, saying that it's completely different. Whatever. I feel better now though, writing down my thoughts tonight. I've had this journal for years, but I haven't written in it since I was a kid. I decided today that my life right now needs to be shared, but more importantly, I want to talk to someone. You and I, Journal, are going to become besties. So here's to many more life stories to come, and thank you in advance for always being here. P.S. I'm praying that school tomorrow is amazing and that no one is talking about how slutty I am and the fact that I drunkenly maybe lost my virginity to Dylan. Fingers crossed. So that's my first chapter of my book. I hope it sucks you in. And thanks for listening. I really appreciate it. And basically, this idea for this video or episode all stemmed from this ladies' night that I hosted a week or two ago. And we were all sitting around sharing sex stories, and we started talking about the night we all lost our virginity. And a lot of us, it was 14 years old, 15 years old, 16. And I had this like overwhelming realization that as we were sharing these stories, a lot of us had this experience once and then waited months or maybe even years to have sex again because we didn't feel ready the first time we had intercourse. So it just made me have this overwhelming realization that a lot of us, especially in my generation, we didn't learn about consent. We didn't learn about proper, sexual education. I feel like it was so vague. And so it was just quite an experience to be sitting around surrounded by all these women that I love so much and to be hearing their experiences about the first time they had sex. And we just started having this conversation about how we felt like we reclaimed our virginity at a later date. And so I guess that leads me to my conversation that I want to have with you today, which is, redefining virginity, the term itself. And, my first time, I don't remember giving consent. I felt so fucked up and drunk the next morning finding that out. It wasn't a good feeling. I felt violated. As you move through my life in the book, there's a lot of feelings and trauma that come back up from this first relationship because I ended up dating this guy for a year and a half. But I just want to remind you that if something like this did happen to you are not alone. And it happened to so many of us. And it's something that I feel like we, need to own and share our stories to make us all feel like we're not alone. I just feel like that connection is what fuels us in a really powerful and meaningful way. And then, this guy, I started dating this guy and I waited 6 months to have sex again, I guess. But that first time didn't feel like my first time. I remember towards the end of our relationship, he was asking me, what do you love about me? Like, what is it that you like most about me? And I remember just racking my brain. I couldn't think of anything. And I was just blurting out like, your brown eyes. And he looked at me and was like, excuse me? My eyes are blue. And at that moment, it was the first sign that I didn't absorb as a young 16-year-old, but I realize now, and years later, realize now that entire relationship, I was disconnected. I felt like I was floating above my body every time we had sex. I didn't often have any pleasure or felt like I was faking it a lot. And, it was confusing because I was so young and I didn't know why. And it wasn't until later on in my adult life that I realized that, even though he said that I agreed to sex, even with him saying that I gave my consent, I didn't feel that I was in the right mindset with all of the drinking I had done to give consent. I also felt violated because I didn't remember any of it. So it was just this overwhelming feeling later on in life that I felt like I was assaulted the first time I had intercourse. And so I know that that's part of my, the healing journey, and it's taken me a long time to understand that and forgive myself and my 15 and 16-year-old self and forgive him and, other assault and trauma that I've dealt with later in life, how it's all just kind of began from this first night. A lot of people say that, that might have led to, that early assault might have led to this promiscuous behavior that I found later in life, or, always seeking this freedom and exploring. But I always felt like I had this very adventurous mindset from such a young age. So perhaps that was part of my healing journey, was needing to be a little bit more promiscuous, was not understanding boundaries because mine were crossed the first time I let someone in my pants. So or let someone penetrate me. So there are a lot of ways to heal as we move through some early traumas or feeling violated. It can take a lot of different forms, but I find that, redefining this term virginity has really helped me. And I just think it's an idea that we need to embrace. So I hate the word lose it, like lose your virginity. Who'd you lose it to? I lost my virginity then. Like, I just don't like that word. I think we should get rid of it. Or 2 words. I don't like this idea that our virginity is something to lose. I much prefer this idea that it's this experience to gain. Perhaps it's, the first time we said yes. It's not black and white virginity. It's not. Maybe it's actually the first time you felt comfortable in your sexuality or your gender. Maybe it was the first time you orgasmed or felt pleasure or felt safe. There's so many different ways to kind of redefine that moment for us. And perhaps you maybe even are leaning more towards this ideology that you don't really care about the virginity. And that's okay too. There's this big, deeply rooted idea of this virginity. And, obviously it stemmed from this Catholicism, but I feel like, obviously that's not the case anymore. And it's powerful to share this connection with another human being. It's even powerful to, maybe say that the time you lost your virginity was the first time you had sex with yourself. I think you get to decide what virginity means to you. And I just think that society has often placed this pressure on us. And it's just such a thing when you're growing up that everyone wants to know how many people you've had sex with and when you lost your virginity. And it can be very heavy for some of us when, we weren't ready that first time. And so again, I felt just really warm and fuzzy with surrounded by all my favorite women. And we were just talking about this idea that you can reclaim this virginity. And my idea to discussing today of redefining the term entirely. So again, I feel like it's not something to lose. Again, it's something to gain. And, my first time, every time someone's asked me when I had sex for the first time, I was so confused at what to say. And there were moments in high school where I just always said it was this 6 months later when I had been dating the same guy, and I finally planned sex. I was finally ready. I felt like it was the time I said yes. It was the time I felt in control. We had planned it for a basketball game in my bed. And yeah, it was shitty sex. It lasted less than 3 minutes. It still was painful. I didn't feel extremely comfortable. It felt very short-lived and bizarre. That was my first time. It wasn't that time that I don't remember giving consent. It wasn't that time that I woke up after a Halloween party and everyone was talking about me getting my cherry popped in the bedroom in the basement. That wasn't my first time, but I've learned as I've gotten older that I like to kind of own that first experience as well. I like to let people know that that is what happened to me, but it was a violating experience, and it didn't have this powerful feeling that I feel like we should feel when we do have this first intimate connection with a lover for the first time. And that is powerful, even if you're moving more towards this ideology that you don't think virginity is a big deal, which I fully support. For me, I still feel like connection and sex is this kind of divine experience between us, and it is powerful. And it can be really heavy, but it also can be really rewarding and pleasurable. And there's just so many facets of sex that make it a little bit of an overwhelming experience for a lot of us. And especially with people who have dealt with insecurities or shame and or trauma and assault, sometimes it can come up in ways that we least expect. Again, like, you decide what virginity means to you, not your parents, not the organizations you're part of, not your friends, not the lover that you are having sex with. And I just think we need to separate this virginity, away from penis and vagina, because again, that's not what it is. It doesn't matter what your gender or your sexuality is. Like, the experience that we share with another human for the first time, or maybe even with yourself for the first time, can be a really big and powerful moment. And I just think that redefining virginity as this something to gain and something to grow with and move you into this more open and sexually understood human being. Because again, sex, like I know I've said so many times, is a big part of us, and I think it should be embraced and it should be supported. And you should always love yourself for wanting to explore these different crevices of your body. And so I just want to remind you that you get to decide what that moment is for you. And that's all I got to say today. So I hope you enjoyed my writing. I know this is the second time I've shared a piece of my writing. I really appreciate the support and the love. And again, thank you so much for all your ideas and your questions. And I hope this touches some of you in a profound way and makes you look back on maybe that first time that you had, and feel more powerful in redefining it, or choosing what sexual moment meant the most to you and felt like the time where you claimed your sexuality and your virginity. And I think that can just be really healing. Thanks again for being here. Much love. Please don't forget to share my content if you're enjoying it. I love you guys. Mwah. Talk soon.